These days, it's perfectly legal for someone to enjoy cannabis after work, whether they're having a quick vape in the comfort of their home, knocking back an edible, or even sipping on a THC beverage. But for some organizations, cannabis use is still a deal breaker. Pre-employment testing remains common in many fields that are considered safety critical, including the transport, oil and gas, and manufacturing sectors. Even though some argue that what they do in their private life shouldn't affect what happens when they're on the clock. One problem with testing for THC is that it's hard to prove impairment.
Habitual recreational users of cannabis, like people who smoke a joint in the evening when they get home from work, oftentimes will test positive for cannabis, even though they may not believe that they're impaired at work.
The most accurate way to test is through a blood test, but experts say urine tests are still the standard. The problem, however, is that urine has the longest detection time, and THC can remain detectable for up to 30 days, long after impairment has passed. This means that many workers often have no choice but to abstain or risk losing out on a potential gig.
One by one, please.
Since marijuana was legalized in 2018, much has changed. According to Stats Canada, we've gone from having just 182 outlets for legal cannabis in the beginning to well over 3,000 as of the first quarter of 2023. In 2021, nearly 1/3 of Nova Scotians aged 15 or over reported using cannabis in the previous 12 months. Those numbers suggest that nearly 1 in 3 Nova Scotians might not be eligible to work certain jobs, all on the basis of their recreational habits. In Nova Scotia, 2 companies that do still test for cannabis are Irving Shipbuilding and Halifax Water. Irving says that in safety-sensitive roles, all individuals given a conditional offer of employment must be tested to ensure they're fit for duty. Halifax Water has a similar policy, but says all potential workers, period, must be tested prior to being hired. If they fail, their job offer is rescinded. The organization says that it respects employees' personal time, but that their primary focus is on the safety of their employees and the public. There are, however, some possible exceptions. If someone is using cannabis for medical purposes or has an addiction, they may be able to argue that rescinding a job offer is discriminatory. But declining to hire someone because they enjoy using cannabis recreationally is still perfectly valid.
Sure, there's generally no obligation on an employer to hire anyone. So it's quite easy for employers to make the determination that they don't want to hire people who are habitual or, general cannabis users.
So, overall, what's the bottom line? Is it legal for companies to test for cannabis use even though it's legal to enjoy it? As it turns out, the answer is generally yes. It might not always seem fair, but it is above board. And even though attitudes towards cannabis use may be changing, most policies have generally remained the same since legalization. So if you want to put your best foot forward on the job hunt, you may have to make some sacrifices.
The easiest thing, the safest thing, the way to mitigate risk in terms of securing your employment is obviously to not use cannabis recreationally.
Andrew Sampson, CBC News, Halifax.